Hello, packages, parsers, and programs. Do you love secure code? I hope you did something special this Valentine's Day. Whether you have a type, whether your love is constant or variable, whatever your language is, don't put your trust into some zodiac star sign. Base it on decisions from Secure by Design. And so this week, we dive into AppSec news with Adrian Sanabria and John Kinsella with a focus on LLMs writing code, analyzing code, and making more, or maybe less, work for everyone. Check your horoscope and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show to learn the latest tools and techniques to understand DevOps, applications, and the cloud. Your trusted source for the latest AppSec news. It's time for Application Security Weekly. Zero trust is clearly the future as threats get faster, quieter, and harder to detect. But implementing it shouldn't disrupt the business. ThreatLocker enforces default deny and execution in a way that remains enterprise-ready, scalable, and operationally clean. Unknown software is stopped cold. Trusted apps stay contained, and drift is locked down across the environment. It's zero trust that works in real enterprises and prepares you for the threats ahead. See why CISOs are adopting it at securityweekly.com/threatlocker. Generative AI is powerful, but it comes with real risks, from prompt injection to data leakage misuse and agentic AI. The OWASP Gen AI Security Project unites a global community of expert practitioners who tackle these challenges every day. Together, they've built practical playbooks, adoption guides, and the OWASP Top 10 for LLMs, resources any team can apply right now to strengthen AI security. And it doesn't stop there. This is open source, built by practitioners, for practitioners, working together to secure generative AI. Visit securityweekly.com/OWASP to use the playbooks and join the effort to protect tomorrow's intelligence today. This is episode 370, recorded February 11th, a little bit of an off week for us, 2026. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and I'm here with John Kinsella. Hello, John. Good to see you.
Hey there. Good morning. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to follow that intro. I don't think I can.
Sounds like Mercury's in retrograde for John. But helping us out on Venus Rising is Adrian Sanabria. Hello, Adrian.
Hey, how's it going? Always fun. I enjoy your intros. And when I host a show for you, I try to do the show justice by coming up with my own.
You absolutely have it. We greatly appreciate you doing that and embracing the theme of the show. And we'll give a quick pitch to also go check out Adrian's show. When do your shows drop, Adrian? What day should they be looking
Mondays.
during the week? Mondays as well. Awesome.
We record on Thursdays, but they drop on Mondays.
And what was the name of that show again?
Enterprise Security Weekly.
Oh, sounds great.
Putting the E in security. I love it.
It's pretty great. It's now that we have Jackie McGuire as a co-host, she kind of outshines everyone else. She's just naturally the star of the show every episode that she's on, which I am totally fine with.
Yeah, both of you have dropped by the past before, so we'll have to dig out from the archives which one those are so people can see. But listen to Jackie, listen to Adrian. And if you're going to security conferences, I've got two announcements for you. One is my favorite. Most security conferences talk about threats. Zero Trust World lets you attack them, which I'm going to lose the joke when it's about Zero Trust World attacking other conferences rather than attacking threats. I know, but not yet, because it's only from March 4th to 6th, so it's coming soon in Orlando, Florida. This hands-on cybersecurity event features live hacking labs where you'll break real environments, think like an adversary, and learn how attacks really work. You'll get expert sessions, real-world case studies, CPE credits, get those credits, and networking with top practitioners. Register today at securityweekly.com/ZTW. And if that's not enough for you, March can be busy. Security Weekly listeners save $100 on your RSAC 2026 All Access Pass. RSAC 2026 will take place March 23rd to 26th right here in San Francisco. Come say hi. To register using our discount code, visit securityweekly.com/RSAC26 and use the code 56U5SecWeekly. John, Adrian, thank you for your patience getting through all of the preamble, because we've got a lot of news to get through today. And as usually what I try to do is bring in articles that have a related theme or a bit of a narrative arc to them. And today our story starts with a familiar friend, a familiar face here on ASW, Daniel Stenberg and Curl, talking about the end of bug bounty for the curl project as paid bug bounty. They're still doing vulnerability disclosure programs, but starting off with open source security in spite of AI. And the gist of this is a bit of a summary and a link to a FOSDEM video a presentation that he gave. And he's pointing out, not to repeat too much, yes, they've dropped the bug bounty program, basically because humans were using the AI slop. And he points out that this exploded about 2 years ago, but it was not unique to AI. They still got lots of sloppy reports from humans using tools and just giving bad stuff. But what surprised me, and what I thought I'd pull the two of you in to talk about, is near the end of his presentation, he points out that they've been working with some AI security companies, and they fixed around 100 issues found by those tools. And some of those examples are code doesn't comply with the protocol spec, or the code and the comment in the code says something that the code actually, as written, disagrees with, or there's an edge case that the protocol implementation forgot. So those do start to seem like that makes sense to use AI. But obviously, it's very heavily curated AI. And I don't know if that part, how much either of you have been embracing heavily curated AI use or just vibe coding. How much any takers on the vibe parts of just let it go and see what it finds?
I'll take whatever I can get. I mean, it's so good. Just take all of it.
I'm detecting perhaps some sarcasm there.
Yeah, I'm just sort of browsing through I missed the slides on this before. I think we're seeing at the core of this. I do have a little bit of a problem with the curated word, but I think at the core of this stuff, there's good examples and bad examples, and you've got people on both ends of the spectrum sort of talking loudly. And I think it takes someone like this to come up and figure out, hey, what can we actually use this for? Where is it actually useful for us?
Yeah, and I think, we'll play with the curated, because I have some other articles that talk about the both small and large examples of that, and we'll figure out what that is. But I did at least want to tie in a second article from a couple different areas about vibe coding is killing open source software. And the point of that is more about in the back of our minds to keep in the idea of the community and how do humans not just write code, because I think vibe coding, we'll use that as an easy shorthand, but it's more about how do humans maintain projects. Curl is obviously one that we go and talk with about a lot. And this article is more about the social and honestly monetary costs or rewards or lack thereof for open source maintainers, and how vibe coding is sort of just adding some intermediation so that users using code aren't looking at the documentation, they aren't seeing or appreciating or even knowing where this AI or LLM is pulling code from or interacting with. So they're losing, if you will, a little bit of the marketing, for example, that there's an example from Tailwind that this article calls attention to. Or I'll just use a quick parallel of, LLMs and search engines, just people no longer clicking through links. And so it's collapsing and cratering like ad revenue for news sites, et cetera, things like that. So I don't know exactly where I'm going with that in a sense from an AppSec perspective, but it's one of those things that I just wanted to highlight. There's a difference between vibe coding versus maintaining projects. And I did want to focus on the maintaining and projects itself rather than just joking about 5 lines of code. So I see I've possibly lost you both. So what I'm going to do is, let's see.
I'm waiting for the other guy to go first, but I'm forming my thoughts.
Yeah, I don't have a great segue, but my thought on this is that this isn't the first time we've seen a lot of slop hitting open source projects. We definitely had a period where people would just take DAST and SAS tools, open source DAST and SAS tools, and just basically pipe the output to the developer, false positives and all, right? So this is something I think open source projects have been struggling with for a while. And, one of the reasons, one of the arguments for using like a bug crowd or a HackerOne here is not only to protect researchers when things need to be reported to large corporations who might want to sue those researchers, but also the inverse to protect those companies from just massive amounts of noise that are not important, and that's why they implemented kind of like an Uber driver. Like the company gets a rating. How quick are they to respond? How good are they to the researchers, and then the researchers also get a score. How much slop versus well written, useful bug reports do they submit? And I think not everybody can afford to use, like that's one of the problems here. Like a lot of these are just, it's just one person maintaining this, or in, some of the cases, like Tailwinds, it's a small commercial company with open source, and, that open source side of the business that doesn't make them any money is threatening to eat up all the time, and threaten the viability of the business. So, yeah, I think we need, it almost needs to be like some kind of bug reporting CAPTCHA, like some kind of mechanism for them to filter out the slop, right?
Yeah, it's almost like, and it's not,
and maybe that's more AI. I don't know. Maybe that's the easiest way to implement. I hate to say it.
Well, and what I was going to say is, it's not even a CAPTCHA to like, are you human? It's more of, did you even read what you're trying to submit to this project? Do you even know what is there any security problem there? And I have an article that we'll get to in a second that's about one of the aspects, and even Daniel Stenberg talks about this, is that a lot of the LLM write-ups, bug findings, can sound very persuasive. And that's what makes it harder to tease out, like, it used to be a tool gave obvious false positive. That obvious false positive is not quite there again. And that's where I'll bring in an article from Anthropic. And this is Evaluating and Mitigating the Growing Risk of LLM Discovered 0 Days. So this is, I'll say up front, it feels a little bit more marketing and how cool is our Opus 4.6, but there is still some good detail in here. So I'm always cognizant of how much I am, just repeating a good marketing blog post versus a technical blog post. But the gist of this is that they found 500 high severity vulnerabilities that are mostly, or I think probably all, in memory corruption vulns. So that was one of the things that I had reading this article. I had a lot of questions I was more curious about, like, exactly what does high severity mean? Is it just because it's memory corruption and it causes a crash, it becomes high severity? But to set this up a little bit, they did unleash their new version of Opus. They basically said, here are some tools to write code to interact with code, like Python, a debugger. Here's some tools to analyze code. And they didn't give it any more instructions. They just said, go find some memory corruption vulns. And it sounds like they were focused on that because memory corruption tends to lead to a crash. And like with fuzzing, crashes are pretty easy to identify, and there's clearly a bug. It may not be a security bug, but there's a bug. They do a little bit of hand waving where they say, what was it? They launch this against most well-tested code bases, projects that have fuzzers running against them for years, accumulating millions of hours of CPU time. I would love to know how much GPU time they spent, finding these 500 vulns. But that's why I wanted to introduce it. I don't know. Let me throw over to Adrian first again. You were just thinking, we were talking, riffing about Slop and what comes back from Bug Bounty. Here's 500 different projects that got a lot of bugs. Does this start to appeal to you if these are very, as LLM as a security, I guess what questions do you have to say, how good were these? Maybe is where I'm going with this.
So, I've talked to somebody who said they had immediately started having more success with AI when they started with what good output looks like, what success looks like. And like, maybe here's 500 examples of really good bug submissions, of really valid, really impactful stuff. Now go find stuff, and then evaluate the stuff you find against these really good 500 examples of stuff that we want to see from you. And maybe something like that helps here, but there's got to be some kind of validation step to ensure that, because like in this case, Anthropic is just inserting Claude into a virtual machine, and it's using the same tools that a researcher would use to find these bugs. So it's actually using open source security fuzzing tools, stuff like that, to find these things. So, it needs to.
Do you think that's a good thing or bad thing?
I don't think it really matters as long as there is some kind of validation step, where you can determine if this thing is good or bad. And one of the big complaints here is like even if we assume these are all good, like there's still, you just created an enormous amount of work for these maintainers. And, maybe open source maintainers prioritize submissions that come with fixes over ones that just come with problems.
So we'll get into validation in a second, and because here's the reveal, there were humans involved, and they did have fixes associated with them. But before we get into that, I want to talk about John.
But John brought up a really good point.
Does it matter? Yeah.
Like I see a lot of this stuff. It's like this is possible to do with AI, and nobody ever tells you what the cost was, right?
Oh.
Is it financially viable to use it for this? Like, I don't care. Sure, lots of things are possible with generative AI, but are they budget friendly? That matters.
I was hoping this article would come up last. And it's because I want to sort of use it. In my head, I'm using it to bookend some of the other discussions I'd like to have in here. We'll see. But from my point of view, let's get philosophical for a second. Go back to think about the open source one. Does open sources go real wide mind here for a second? Does open source still need to exist? Like, do we need to still have people contributing? And this comes back to Adrian. We had on the last show an article talking about do we still need to be using frameworks like React or Vue.js or things like that? Like, why would you need a framework when the LLM can write the code specifically for the button that you need to do on the screen, right? Run with me with that for a second. So with that argument or with that concept, which I'm not fully bought into, but what more is there for open source to contribute to the world? We've got Linux, we've got these huge code bases, we've got these things. Are they good enough to train robots? If so, hell, I still love good open source party or a conference, excuse me. But do we need to be having these folks spending their time in their evening writing something which people may or may not want to use? Or should people be thinking more about, hey, maybe something from Star Trek, right? We're not getting our Earl Grey tea, but maybe it's like, hey, give me an application to do whatever I'm looking for. And I don't think we're there yet, but the reason I want to bookend this article with that is people go, oh, the security. If I've got an LLM which is good enough to find security issues, why wouldn't I just have it go and check the code after it writes it, or actually look for and apply fixes? So there's a bit of a flywheel thing going on. I'm not saying we're there yet, but that's going to be interesting to see.
And that's where I wanted to, we'll basically split this article in half, because I think, I like where you're thinking there, John, because if we talk about just the finding the vulns aspect, this article from Anthropic, one of my complaints is that, they found 500 issues, but they only gave 3 examples. And one of those examples, for example, to use that word a lot, was it identified a vuln, a potential path traversal. So, hey, okay, you caught my attention there. But it's in the string char and string cat operations, which you could kind of possibly just find through a grep and maybe not say with confidence that this is clearly a crash that can happen or an exploitable vuln. But there could also just be the aspect of, a complaint from your compiler that says, this is a deprecated function. Why don't you rewrite this in a known safe way or in a safer way, and just skip the whole fuzzing and have an LLM or a human generate that fix for something that's a very common anti-pattern. And I don't know if that, I think I'm agreeing with John's concept there in the sense of not... in the sense of what does it matter what tool we're using? I'm just sort of sneaking in my favorite grep, for example. And I don't know on that finding the vulns, Adrian, I think you were going to say something, but if this finding the vulns, is the LLM is it the cool new fancy tool, or is it the efficient, cost-effective tool, or do we just not really have to worry about the cost now? We can kind of hand wave that away.
Ever feel like your network infrastructure is stuck in the past? Meet Meter, the company reimagining what it means to get and stay online. Meter delivers full-stack networking, wired, wireless, and cellular, all in one seamless, scalable, and secure solution. From hardware design and firmware to software deployment and support, Meter streamlines every part of your network while giving you all the control and transparency you need. Whether you're managing a branch office, retail stores, or a massive data center, Meter gives you performance, reliability, and the visibility you need to stay in control. Thanks to Meter for sponsoring. Go to securityweekly.com/meter to book a demo now. That's securityweekly.com/meter, METER.
Yeah, I mean, they make some interesting points here that they're finding vulnerabilities in some of the most fuzzed, most tested packages out there. So the fact that they're still able to find serious vulnerabilities when these are some of the packages that have been tested and looked at the most. That's and if they're legit vulnerabilities that are dangerous that need to be fixed, that's pretty notable, and we have to consider that. I don't know if it's a rumor, if it's been publicly shared, but I've heard that Dave Aitel and his team over at OpenAI exclusively use AI to find and fix vulnerabilities these days. They don't use SaaS tools anymore for some of that stuff. So I do wonder, the ASPM vendors and the SAST vendors out there, what's going on the product teams there, if these things are going to work alongside traditional tools. In this case, the AI is using some of these tools directly. So I'm very interested in what kind of if it's going to be hybrid or like a hard switch to using LLMs. But again, the cost of using these tools has to be factored in, and I haven't seen anyone share comparisons of that. Like sure, okay, you found these 500 vulnerabilities. Like, what would be the cost to find them with more traditional tools?
Right, and that's one of the things that this Anthropic article says. We found 500, or we reported 500. But it elides what let's say the denominator is, how many findings in total came out of it. And even with OpenAI and Dave Aitel, I remember, I think it was this summer, they mentioned, is it Squirrel was their nickname for their project, where they found some vulns. I haven't seen a follow-up yet, and it has been almost that Kinsella trademark 6 months later, so we got to check on that. But I'm still teasing the validation aspect that you were just talking about, Adrian. Let's pull in, we'll come back to Anthropic article, but let's pull in one from Doyensack. Now, this is a bespoke pen testing company, and the blog post here is Auditing Outline, which is a Notion-like open source project. First-hand lessons from comparing manual testing and AI security platforms. Now, this was interesting because they were hired to do their typical human pen testing for, in this case, an open source project. They found almost a dozen vulnerabilities, I guess 7 vulnerabilities between medium and low, and they made some comments that it was well-architected code base. But as always, there is something to be found. One of the findings was a low finding that they wanted to highlight that was what was this? An IDOR, basically, in what was called an event access feature function. And it was, quote, discovered autonomously by the security AI platform. And what was interesting that they pointed out, what appealed to them is that it was a nice catch because the code implemented a team level isolation, but it didn't apply the authorization checks to individual events. And the AI caught that. And it said, hey, and what they were doing a little anthropomorphizing, saying the AI kind of understood Outline's authorization model, or at least the AI was able to identify basically that these authorization checks do happen, but they just so happen to omit a check on an individual event, and you can get an IDOR out of it. But the real reason I was pulling this out is that, another quote here, as a result, cleaning up and validating all AI reported issues turned into a 40-hour effort. And that as a result is that because the issues that it identified were extreme, they were, well articulated, better articulated than I am right now, apparently. But there's your example too. They ran a tool, but spent another 40 hours of just validating what that tool did. And I think that starts to speak to the cost, and it speaks to an idea of an appeal of LLMs are great and super easy to deploy and run. So you're shifting a lot of configuration and setup of a security tool, but you're putting that time elsewhere in the triage and validation. I don't know that that's a great save there. So I don't know, John, I think, you've got that security background too. You've worked with pen testers. You see these types of reports. Yeah. If we're talking about the costs of these, what does it matter from humans or AI tools? Does this speak to you along those lines?
The issue here right now, what we're seeing across all these, Daniel and everyone else, is it has to do around trust. So I'll let the listener try to figure out, I think you can probably say that putting all these constant submissions in is eroding that trust. And part of the thing which is making it difficult, usually once you erode someone's trust, it's like, oh, it's Adrian, that guy, don't listen to what he's saying, right? But Adrian speaks so smoothly and fluidly and has these great blog posts, and Enterprise Security Weekly is a great podcast. They're like, oh, well, I need to give him a chance. And that's sort of the trade-off here is you have to go through and read and go, is this real or is this, Memorex sort of thing? I get it. I think we're in this window. At some point, this is going to change. At some point, like they've been working on making these bots be a little less have this fake believability to the way they talk. So that's gotten a little bit better over the last few months. But still, it's you're guessing at the next word in many cases what these things are doing, and that's going to result. So the question is, how do we get to a better level of trust? I guess from my point of view. I'm completely not answering the question you asked. Sorry, Adrian. But go ahead.
A lot of that's been fixed through just burning a ton more tokens, right? Like they take the problem, break it down. Like I've seen agents basically do what I'm saying, like try and determine the correct outcome, and then just run a bunch of different scenarios, and so basically they're brute forcing hallucination away. So it takes a lot longer for you to get output, and that output is a lot more expensive than it was like almost overnight when they introduced some of these agentic models. Even though the models were more efficient, you're not using the whole model. They've got, mixture of experts and all that built into the model to make it more efficient. But all that's been burned away by the fact that, your single prompt behind the scenes turns into like 80 prompts or 100 prompts, right? And you get a better result. But we're now starting to see the costs of all that. Like everything that I subscribe to and pay for that has AI attached to it has gotten more expensive in the last 3 to 6 months. Stuff where AI was included in the subscription cost, it is now a separate cost, or it is now only available at a higher subscription tier, or just the subscription price has increased. So more and more we're seeing companies actually charging for like as if they want to make a profit on their business, and I think we're
you and your enterprise thinking.
That's interesting though, because they think the AI has gotten good enough that they can charge for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild though. It's yeah, and this I think it's worth taking into context. They say this involved 2 researchers for a total of 60 person days. So that's 480 hours on this project. And there's no highs or criticals. It's all mediums and lows. And yeah, they can tie a couple of those mediums together, along with the sharing behavior to do something interesting. But I found it kind of surprising that on a fairly new product here that they didn't find more than this. I don't know. Maybe Outline has like really gone hard on security, and it's already in a pretty good state before they started. But these findings, I don't know what you've seen, John, but I expected to see something more after 480 hours and 3 AI tools spent on this than what they came up with.
We've seen this in a few articles now, and I'm curious your take on this, since you're spending a little more time on the ground with the vendors right now. It's following that standard pattern of, we ran AI against this and we found blah 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 blah. Okay, cool. How much that cost? They want to get out and be part of this conversation. Okay, I get it. You want a business to run, but how many articles can we see about? And I'm not knocking the article, Mike, but how many articles can we see around? We ran AI against X and it found.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, and that's part of why I wanted to bring this in, because this is just a good, at least a reference point for what does it cost to find vulns. And to Adrian's point too, there wasn't no highs, which is obviously not a knock against the pen testers or the AI for that matter, but it might point to this was an architecture for Outline that was well architected by humans, perhaps. And it touches a little bit on John's, comment earlier about, do we need frameworks? Does, that aspect, that article we keep referring back to, that we're still kind of exploring, what does that mean to not have frameworks or to still rely on them from open source? And I want to feel that the frameworks are giving us more understanding, in the sense of, I use this example, Adrian, are you using React? Yes. That question is a shorthand for, you're probably well protected from cross-site scripting. Whereas, did you vibe code this up? I have to ask a lot more than just one question to get the confidence. Are you protected from cross-site scripting?
And kind of the big picture here is, like, when we look at the actual attacks being used, they're going after the developers' credentials. There's malicious pull requests. There's prompt injections in pull requests. There's going after the actual delivery mechanism for the software. Whatever the repo is that this thing lives in. Like, how many times have we seen not the code compromised, but the npm install script is where the malicious stuff lies. So like even if this is all great, there are still open source code issues that we have that all dance around the code itself. And
go for the weakest link.
Attackers are just great at, like, okay, you have perfect code, no problem. I will just convince you to click this link and steal your credentials and do nasty stuff.
I'm going to preface this with, I promise you listeners, I'm really not drinking the Kool-Aid as much as it sounds like I am here, but one of the topics we've had on the show here for the last year, probably 2, if not 3 years, Adrian, is when are we going to get these the repos having some decent level of security to filter out these malicious packages, and like if we do it through trust or however you want to do it.
NPM is owned by Microsoft, right? They got Microsoft money.
So maybe we have the robots do it. And it comes back to, like, do we need NPM if you've got the robots being on the code, but also just have the robot on the repo and be filtering stuff out? And then you get into conspiracies of what's the robot letting us see, but separate conversation. I guess it's the flavor of the Kool-Aid I've tasted a little bit of. I've got this hammer. Where do I use it?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I think too, we're also, where do I use it? But I'll also point out, we keep sadly reinventing the same problems that Adrian's describing, even just the code, because I pulled in a couple articles about OpenClaw, CloudBot, whatever you want to call it, I don't know that's worth talking about other than to point out, oh, look, all these skills have backdoors. They have all the problems that John just rattled off there. Even though we've known the problems of NPM, of Ruby gems, et cetera, for a decade plus now, and still struggling to protect those. But given our time, I want to come back now to that Anthropic article and put a little more attention onto the fixing part, because this is something that, Adrian, you touched on, you were mentioning, asking questions about from the very beginning. And I think it also ties in some of your thoughts, John, about where are we using the hammer, or we're using the LLMs of writing code. And my understanding from this article is that they kind of in general are saying we're using Claude to find and help fix vulnerabilities in open source software. But specifically this article, they used all of these 500 bugs were human validated and human reviewed patches. So every single one, and I think they even said they had to hire some contractors to help with the triage for all these vulnerabilities. It was a human in the loop, to use the one of the current phrases, but there was still a lot of costs setting aside just GPU time of humans in here. So I don't know if that changes any of your thoughts, Adrian or John, on, is this hammer, or what did it look like for just how we're reporting in overwhelming, potentially, open source projects. But I wanted to bring that in as sort of the other bookend from what this article is touching on.
I just had to very quickly check, is this hammer.com is available? Yeah, one of the aspects of this, which is constantly in my mind, and we talked about already, is this financial thing. And it would be fun to see a stat of how much time of using the robot is equivalent to the time of someone in industry. I'll be very vague the way I say that, but like, what's the is it 30 minutes with the robot? Is an hour? If the robot spits something out and the engineer, I'll say, has to spend 30 minutes on it, I'm guessing that's a lot more expensive, at least right now. But at the same time, we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars in this stuff. So I'm not really sure. We're in this period of time, at least in my mind, we're in this period of time where we have to have the humans reviewing, and we need to, don't get me wrong. That's going to change at some point. I think part of it is, at least the way I'm thinking of it, is a business question. When are we going to get this stuff cheap enough and accurate enough that we don't need to do this?
Yeah, and that, Adrian, to your question too, and what John was just highlighting, last Monday we covered an article from Wiz and Irregular that was talking about, basically they created 10 different vulnerabilities just to see what an LLM, can it find it? Short story is LLM found 9 out of 10. But what was nice about that particular article, they point out the costs that they encountered. And they were like, oh, this is about a $1 to $10 per run. And some of the runs took 4 to 5 runs for it to reliably find that vulnerability. My comment at the time was, that's very low, but I suspect that's quite subsidized by VCs, et cetera. That's not the true cost of running these tools. And I think you kind of were alluding to that in the sense of, of what's the real cost. And I like how John phrased it. Are these valuable enough to pay for yet? Is it, or is it just everybody's playing with a new shiny hammer, and that's what we're going to use?
If you compare it to what people are paying out for bug bounties, it is cheaper, but I'm not sure people are going to look at it that way, right? Because the folks doing bug bounties are also using these tools, and there's more to just finding the vulnerability. Like, you have to put together the steps to recreate it. You need to write a good bug report. You need to, perhaps you also suggest a solution. And AI can maybe do portions of that as well. I don't know, but it's, when you look at the costs compared to bug bounties, using AI is still considerably cheaper. But if it's a person using AI, then it's a bit harder to calculate here.
Yeah, but one of my complaints or I'm trying not to say well actually, but sorry, this is going to come out as a well actually, Adrian. I apologize, but the point I wanted to make is that yes, I agree with your points. I did want to point out that the cost of bug bounties is tied to impact or severity. This was a high impact. It has nothing to do with the amount of effort or time involved on the part of the researcher, and that's honestly a very fair complaint from a lot of researchers. It also doesn't include what did it cost to fix this? And that's where, if LLMs can reduce that time to fix, if it can create a patch where you just say, hey, we got a bug bounty and it's a 10K bug bounty because of a authorization bypass, go fix it. If you can spend, human hours, that's equivalent of human hours, it's a lot less than 10K to fix it. That is a pretty compelling story. So yes, but that is, I guess, where I don't know that I'm convinced either way yet, but I'm more just asking for where are those dimensions, where are those metrics where we can evaluate what this is looking like.
The problem to cover the I'll call it business math side of it, the economics.
I like it.
The economics of this is it's not the one run, right? It's think about how do we I'll say it, then I'll correct myself. Think about how we use these tools in AppSec right now, right? There's pen testers who go do a one-off bang and go, but on the defense side, we want to put them into a CI pipeline and sort of run them every time and catch that bug as early as we can because we've been telling people that for the last decade. So when you run it like that, the cost is going every time someone does a commit, and that's why this repetitive. It's like, oh, it's only a tenth of the cost of the bug bounty. But when you've been running that for a month and you haven't found anything, you suddenly have a problem. But the where I wanted to correct myself is maybe we need to step back and rethink about how we're using a tool like this. I'm not sure what that usage changes to, but maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, and I think that's where my joking, less helpful answer is. That's why I still like grep, because grep has such a low cost to run on every commit. But I think your point is strongly made in the sense of what is the AppSec? AppSec is like saying shift left is the AppSec cliche, running on every commit. Run this tool. So rather than you're doing it every quarterly pen test or every monthly scan by the AppSec team, now do the scan on every single PR. But that cost gets tough.
You know what I'm going to do if the leaf blower outside isn't too loud? I'm going to vibe code me a Gen AI addition into grep and send in a pull request, and then your greps will be that much better.
Best grep ever. I don't have a good segue here, but I wanted to say I thank you both for this conversation about the LLMs creating code, analyzing code. I did grab one more article that I want to sneak in here. It's not quite on theme, but I was jokingly teasing Microsoft a lot last episode, and the 90s are over. We did not make fetch happen. It's a little bit cliche just to always make fun of Microsoft, and I'm trying to avoid that trap. And so this article, Detecting Backdoored Language Models at Scale, off the Microsoft security blog, did catch my eye. I wanted to mention it real briefly. It's about their focus is on model poisoning and specifically backdoors and open weight language models. So you have to see the weight. So it's not like they can go say, oh, look at this Claude or Opus or OpenAI, Anthropic models. That's more of just what's shared on something like Hugging Face. And it's pretty interesting what their analysis shows is that they were able to identify some signatures, as they put it, into models that have been backdoored, because that backdoor tends to create a predictable pattern, what they call an attention pattern, from a prompt, because the backdoored prompt is intentionally manipulating the behavior of that model. They also point out that they perhaps can even have a scanner that can reconstruct the triggers that would initiate that backdoor prompt, which I thought was pretty interesting. And real quick summary, they point out some limitations. These are very specific types of backdoors. That is something that are almost, I'll say deterministic, but are more like this backdoor is supposed to have a very specific trigger and a very specific action. deterministic outputs, as they pointed out. But I wanted to throw that in as a bit fun, just a different flavor of AppSec and LLMs. John, not sure if this also caught your eye in any fun particular way, or if there's more reading to be done here.
I'd love to comment, but I've got a leaf blower right outside my window. It's not a robot.
Not a robot. Yes, we appreciate the attention to our listeners' ears and audio quality. So what then I will do, since we have a little bit of time left, it's about enough time for 3 words, let's say. Adrian, I think you've stepped in and guest hosted on ASW. I think you know the drill here. I always like to ask our guests, describe AppSec in 3 words. And I want to throw this out to you and John this week as we're having some fun. So Adrian, describe AppSec in 3 words.
Let's see. OpenClaw, attack surface.
Well done. Now, John, I'm going to predict that your answer could be that FN leaf blower, which is 3 words, but perhaps maybe a little bit more AppSec related. What do you have for us?
I thought this up earlier, but the timing works out quite nicely right now, and that's embrace the chaos.
Embrace the chaos. I love it. I also love having both of you talk through the news and have these discussions with me. So thank you, John. Thank you, Adrian. Thanks, everyone, for listening to another episode. Please do remember to subscribe. Also, go subscribe to Enterprise Security Weekly. Make your Mondays fun. Check out the show notes. Share us on the socials. And speaking of using LLMs, check out Talk to Me by Beckett. Add some synthwave to your day. We'll see you next time on Application Security Weekly.